Hello and welcome to another episode of Goalhorns and Fight Songs. I'm your host Wes, and this is my co-host Mike. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
It was a good weekend. So I'm happy that the joy has lasted until this Tuesday.
Yeah, a little better weekend for you than for me, but not by too much.
No, and I think we discussed it a couple weeks ago when Western was able to sweep Colgate. I had a word for that weekend of resilience because the way they were able to come back in both of those games and overcome some difficulties. But I think this week, if I were to put a word on the weekend, it would be respond or response. And I think because going into this weekend, everybody was wondering how they were gonna respond after being swept by Denver. How they were gonna respond to losing their goalie early in the first period for an extended period of time, and I think they met every challenge that they were given and succeeded and pulled away with 6 big points in the NCHC.
Yeah, and I was keeping an eye on that, especially playing the uh, was St. Cloud one or two? I think they were one.
They were two coming into the
They
weekend.
were they were two.
Yeah,
Okay.
because what they do, they split. They didn't. I don't think they split, but they went to overtime with somebody maybe.
But regardless, I was paying attention because that was the number two team in the country, and uh, St. Cloud was the team that was projected to win the NCHC. So that was a very important matchup for this weekend. And then for UMD, pleasantly surprised with the split at North Dakota. I did not think that there was going to be a split, but convincing 4-1 win and then a close 2-1 loss on Saturday to get the split. I'm really happy with that weekend, especially in a tough arena, especially and for the new young guys that have not played at Engelstad, with how big it is and how crazy the North Dakota fans are, and how big that student section is, because that is the sport at North Dakota.
Yeah. Omaha swept or not swept. Split with St. Cloud before St. Cloud came to Western. So that moved them back down a spot, and Michigan was number one. They suffered 2 overtime losses, so number one and two both, depending on who you are, got swept this weekend. I posted a tweet, asking when the last time that may or may not have happened, and some responses. There was no definitive answer one way or for sure, but the consensus was that it hadn't happened before. And then if you ask, CHN College Hockey News, they don't believe in polls or use polls, and they don't consider overtime losses sweeps. So, but I'm pretty sure if you asked any Notre Dame fan what happened this weekend, they're going to tell you they swept U of M and the number one team in the country. So,
Yeah, and I don't blame them. I Me personally, I think you do have to have polls, because I guess you don't have to have them, but they're a lot of fun to have, kind of needed, and helps teams build resumes, where Notre Dame, they could be a fringe team, especially in the Big Ten. Probably won't be, but hey, sweeping the number one team in the country, Michigan, that's huge for them. So CHN, and we don't believe in polls and that. Regardless, you're going to believe in polls just based off of record and strength of schedule. If it is a poll.
I mean, everything's kind of a
Might
poll
not
because
be.
what determines strength of schedule? What makes those teams that are the higher counting teams or whatever matter? Like, it's someone's opinion somewhere. Or a couple people's opinions somewhere.
Right. No matter what it is, it's poll based. So
Yeah.
to say you don't believe in that, well,
Okay, they may not have said they
everyone
don't
does.
believe, but let's see what the actual tweet was. I know they said they don't use them or something to that effect, but it got more traction than I thought it would have. That question. And, I do appreciate all the time that people took to look into it and figure it out. And as far as I'm concerned, it makes this weekend special that both number 1 and 2 did not pick up full points or as many points as they normally do in a weekend.
And I would argue this isn't the NHL. So yes, I know conferences are using shootouts and overtime points. The NCHC does it as well. But regardless, you lost both games. You didn't win. In my opinion, you got swept.
Yeah, let's see. Their exact tweet was, since we don't do polls, we don't know. Also, Michigan was swept, in quotations, not really swept. But again, it doesn't go on your record as a win. You got 1 point, but at the end of the day, I know that if they're counting the overtime win against Western as a win, and they celebrated it like a win, then they lost twice to Notre Dame.
And in the NHL, it's an overtime loss, but you lost. It is a loss.
It is the one thing I miss about, and I don't know if the NCHC still does it for conference games, but I like the all or nothing overtime, where if it's not a tie until after 65 minutes. Like I love that idea behind overtime. I don't really necessarily think it should be a tie after just 60 minutes. Otherwise, what's the point of overtime? Like overtime is meant to determine a winner, and then you can call it a tie.
Yeah, and I don't know if they've changed that or not. I've been under the assumption that it's not considered a tie until the overtime is complete. I think that's still the case, but I haven't looked into it. But that's the way I know the rule, and that's the way I believe it to be.
I believe it's the same as the NHL now, where it's considered a tie after 60. I'm not sure for the conference, but I think in overall play, and that's how Michigan.
NCAA.
Yeah, and that's how Michigan was able to come away with, a point, or like, what is it, 0.45% of a win for each game, and then Notre Dame gets 0.55% of a win for having won in overtime. So like that kind of nonsense. Just stop. Stop it.
Yeah, just make it standard across. And I know the NCHC was, well, I shouldn't say I know, but I believe they were the first conference to actually incorporate a point system like that, where, okay, you go to overtime, both teams get a point, but then
they went when
somebody gets the extra.
For conference play, I'm not sure if it's still this way, but I know at one point there was no points determined until after 5-on-5 overtime, back when it was 5-on-5 overtime for 5 minutes. Then it was, if you won in overtime, it was a 3-point win, no matter what. Then they went to, then it was, they would play a 3-on-3 overtime, or after the 5-on-5 overtime, it was 1 point apiece, and they would play 3-on-3 overtime for another 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. If you won that, you got 2 points. If you lost, you got 1. If nobody won there, then it went to a shootout, and whoever won the shootout got the 2 points. So I know that's how it used to be, but with getting rid of the 5-on-5 overtime, I'm not sure what the new standard is.
This is why we need a researcher.
That's what I'm saying.
This is why we need to employ somebody. I've been shot down. You've been shot down. Your wife, my girlfriend.
Hey, you know what? I did get people to respond to my incredibly challenging question. So, on the Twitters. And I bet you somewhere, if I go to the actual NCHC website and not their subscription page, it might still say in the rules or whatever it is.
Maybe, if we're lucky.
Hey, this is the point of doing a live show. You see how the sausage is made. But getting back to the Western St. Cloud game, I think It was one of those series or weekends where your top players were your best players. We saw that definitely Friday night. Ethan Frank, who is tied for the NCAA lead in points or in goals, was the Bronco leader in goals, picking up 4 goals. He was also the Bronco leader in points this weekend with 5 points overall. 4 goals, 1 assist, bringing his season total to 19 points. Another guy on the team who's tied with Ethan at 19 points, Drew Warad, picked up 3 more assists this weekend, bringing his season total to 15 assists. And Mikey Joyal picked up another goal. He picked up a goal on Saturday, picked up 3 more assists on Friday, bringing his season total to 14 points. And I think I've mentioned Joyal before. He's a really good shooting defenseman. He's got a real strong shot, and he's starting to release it a little bit more, get some more confidence into it. He was the first NCHC defenseman to record a hat trick. Western having both defensemen to have hat tricks in NCHC history. The second being Ronnie Addard, who picked one up in the Colgate series earlier this year. So our D-men definitely know how to shoot. And anytime that they're able to shoot, I think it just opens up more options, especially on a power play, because I think that's how Mikey picks up most of his assists. They're tip-ins in front of the net or rebounds after he unleashes, his howitzer from the blue line. So definitely really like seeing him shoot the puck.
Yeah, and if you have that threat, you're going to open up the box more because, I know there's different strategies, but typically the PK has a box, and the forwards, they're going out to block the shots. If the defensemen aren't going to really shoot, they're not going to go out as far. And it applies to any sport. If you're not a threat from the outside, you can't go inside. And if you're a threat from the inside, you can go outside. And with that outside threat, then that opens it up. They're going out to block the shots more. And then you can pass it to the wings and, go circle, center, and backdoor opens up quite a bit because you're opening up that box and they can't collapse nearly as fast.
Yeah. Oh, and I did find the answer to our question earlier. It does look like they've moved to the standard 3 for a win, 2 for an overtime or shootout win, and 1 point for an overtime or shootout loss. So, they're on the pretty standard.
They're on the NHL schedule.
Other than, I wish... The NHL's only 2 points, though. And they make up a weird 3rd point if you make it to overtime. It's the most irritating thing in the world.
Well, it's 2 points for a win.
And then
yeah. And then you get the extra.
They create an extra point out of nowhere. Where the thing I like about the way the NCHC does it is you're not creating a loser point or a magical point out of nowhere. The point numbers exist.
You're taking away from the fact that you didn't beat them outright in regulation.
Correct. Like I like that idea. I like the way that works. I think it makes you want to play full hockey. When you're down 1 or 2 goals and you're pulling that goalie, you're pulling them for a chance to pick up all the points, not for a chance to, make it to overtime and tie, basically.
Well, yeah. This ain't no soup kitchen.
No. And then another, back to that response or respond thing that I was talking about earlier, Brandon has had a few tough weeks giving up 3 or more goals in multiple games, going back to the Colgate series. The first night he gave up 5 goals. The second night he only gave up 1. Against your Bulldogs, I think he gave up 3 both nights. 2 the first night and 3 the second night. The night you guys won, I think he gave up quite a few, at least 3.
Yeah. The first night he was pretty solid.
It might help if I actually wrote more of this down, but I like to go by memory. That's not always the best idea.
Yeah, it was 3, and he gave up 3 both nights.
Yeah. Because the first night was 5-3, 4-3,
4-3,
and then 3-0. We got blanked.
Fanti got the first out of his 3 shutouts in a row.
And then we went to Denver, and that was we lost in the second period both times. He gave up 5 in each of those games. So on a little bit of a skid, giving up at least 3 goals for 2 straight full weekends, plus a big game against a non-conference opponent in Colgate that Western was able to overcome. But he responded really good. He gave up 2 goals all weekend. His stats were 64 for 66 to saves to attempts for the entire weekend. And I think when you're seeing and that's missing sometime because again he took a high stick, I believe, which led to a major penalty and a game misconduct or a game penalty, whatever it was, on Friday night. And the backup goalie didn't see any shots, so he was responsible for making all the saves this weekend. And to shut out, the number 2 team in the country, a team like St. Cloud, who's built on being quick and scoring lots of goals, it says a lot about his ability to respond and be the backstop that the team needed him to be.
Right, and St. Cloud, they're high powered and they're deep. They're I was actually just talking with one of my coworkers tonight before I left work, and on his men's league team, one of the guy's sons is kind of a healthy scratch player, fringe, might be a freshman on St. Cloud. And all I could say is the fact that he's even on the team, that shows the depth that they have. And that's really good because their fourth line is just as dangerous as their first line.
Oh yeah.
They're such high-powered, big offense, and they defend really well. So to hold them to 2 goals for a whole weekend, that's very, very impressive by Western.
And it's surprising how well they defend, because there's definitely some times where we were running into like too many bodies in front. I mean, granted, a score like 6-2 doesn't kind of tell you exactly what's going on, because 2 of those were empty net goals on Friday night. But they're not a very big team. Like, Western was definitely the bigger, thicker, top to bottom roster, which Western's kind of always built their teams that way. And St. Cloud was definitely smaller, a little bit more agile, but I mean, if you get pinned up against the wall, it doesn't really matter. The smaller guy's not going to be able to get away from the monsters that Western are when they get you up against the boards and kind of wear you out that way. So, and there's even a couple like shifts within the game, and a lot of coaches don't necessarily want to use the term momentum, or like to use the term momentum, whatever it is. But there was a couple shifts where Western really had to respond to some high pressure in the offensive zone, and one of which on Friday, they legit, as soon as they were able to get out of the zone, they scored a goal, and I think that might have been Frank's first goal on Friday night, when he picked up his natural hat trick, +1. So, but it was just it seemed like response was the word of the week leading into this weekend, and then they really showed it and proved it and were able to accomplish it. So, very happy there.
Yeah, that's a huge win, a huge weekend for that team. Especially with the older kids who they've been in the middle of the pack basically their whole career, 4, 5, 6, like, we're okay, we can compete every now and then. That's going to build the confidence. And then for the younger players that have made the team, because I know we both have 2 of the older teams in the conference, the younger kids that have made it, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, we can play with these guys. So what, they're number 2 in the country. So what, they were national championship last year. Who cares?
Right.
We can play with anybody.
And I think it's going to draw in future classes too. Like, they're going to show like, oh, these guys can get right up there at the top of the national rankings. They're going to be playing in tournaments. They're going to be competing for tournament titles, whether it's something like the Shillelagh tournament we've played in before, or what used to be the GLI or Ice Vegas, which we've I don't know if any other NCHC team has been invited to yet, but that was something that a tournament that Western got invited to and won. So it speaks highly when you can do those kinds of things and compete with the top tier teams in the country year in and year out.
Yeah, and that's the fun part is you get another team like Western competing at a high level. The recruits are going to come in, and that's going to make the conference even better. Because now I think I saw, what is Western, 7th in the nation this week?
I believe so. I believe that's where they got to.
Yeah, and UMD is 2nd. Mankato is 1. UMD is 2nd. Most of the NCHC teams are ranked in the top 20 in the nation, and that's going to bring a lot of recruits in.
I think I saw something that NCHC posted that we have 5 of the top 10 and 6 of the top 12. So no matter what, it's literally like 50% of the top. However you want to look at the top.
Let's see. We'll find that out real quick.
But and it's kind of it's not the first time it's been that way either. It's definitely been a year in and year out thing.
Not.
Yep, here it is. 6 of the top 11 and 5 of the top 10.
2, 5, 6, 7,
9 and 11, I believe.
No, Minnesota is 11. 12 is Denver.
Okay. When I have it, looks like it shows. Oh, it depends on which poll you're looking at too.
Yeah, this is
because the
USCHO.
Yeah, the USA magazine poll.
USA Today.
Denver and Minnesota are switched. So.
Yeah.
But either way, I mean, you're looking at potentially once again the strongest conference in the country.
Right, because there's only CC,
CC and Miami are not in the rankings.
Yeah, and to have all the teams that high, that just shows the strength of schedule. And going to that, just even UMD splitting with North Dakota to move up to 2.
Yeah.
Now North Dakota, they moved down, but they only moved down to, well, they were 6, so they actually stayed the same. UMD moved up 2 spots.
Which, some of that being St. Cloud being swept, Michigan losing 2 games in overtime. I'm just going to call them swept. Both of those teams getting swept moves you up 2 and them down significantly. So I think some of it makes sense. I still don't get how Michigan's up as high as they are, having 3 losses. I think they have. Well, no, it'd be 4. I think they have 4 now, 4 or 5. They have at least 4 that I know of.
Yeah, they have 4. They're 10-4-0.
So it's 2 overtime losses to Notre Dame, who is now a top 10 team. A loss to Western, who was unranked or not very highly ranked at the time. And then a loss to Minnesota State, who was... I don't remember if they were ranked at the time, but it was in that icebreaker tournament.
I believe they were. They've been
up there near the whole for pretty much the whole season. So
yeah. But speaking of UMD getting to number 2, the games this weekend, I was able to watch some of Saturdays, but I was driving Friday and driving some of Saturdays. But they just looked like the better team overall. What hurt them on Saturday is they got a 5-minute major boarding call. I think they were able to kill it off. The power play didn't do so much Friday for them. North Dakota did have I think it was their third line center was ejected because he decided to cross check I think one of our defensemen right in the kisser as the radio play-by-play guy put it. He goes, and they reviewed it and everything. He goes, I don't know why this is taking so long. He cross-checked him right in the kisser. I don't care who you are. You got to get ejected for that one. But it was another strong performance by Fanti, and giving up only 3 goals for the weekend to a team that has proven you and I both wrong, that they are a team to be reckoned with. I think that shows that UMD is still as strong as ever, and they've had I can't remember it. Gilling is his last name. I can't remember his first name right now. I'll have it in a second. Casey Gilling. He had 2 more goals on Friday, and he's been coming on lately. He's been one of our offensive powerhouses. Kobe Roth, he scored again on Friday, and then Blake Biondi, one of the many studs that have come out of Hermantown. He scored the only goal on Saturday. But UMD has spread it around as far as scoring, and that's kind of been their strength. There's no one player like a Western with Ethan Frank leading the nation in goals. It's depth. It's all 4 lines rolling, strong defensive play, solid goaltending, a well-rounded team, and they showed that this weekend. Yeah, it was unfortunate that they lost on Saturday, but that's better than I thought it was going to be. I know last week I said I thought they were going to get swept at Engelstead, and they were able to pull out a split. So I'm happy with that performance this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to say that Western's like overly relying on Ethan for their offense. Like, yes, he is definitely leading the team as far as goals go, but you've got guys with assists, like multiple guys or 2 guys in plus 10 assists right now. We have goal scorers across the board as far as, experience levels. Thirteen players have scored a goal so far this year, and I think that that Colgate game, Ronnie had 3 of them, but most of those guys, were picking up their first goal of the year or something to that effect. We're definitely getting goals from everybody. It just happens to be that in the times where it seems like we absolutely need a goal or we're capitalizing on a situation, Ethan's the one who's able to capitalize, and it makes sense when it's a 5th-year guy who's got experience playing pretty much everybody in the conference and scoring on everybody. But he's kind of come out of nowhere as far as the ridiculous amount of goals that he's put up so far this year. I mean, averaging a goal a game.
And I'm not saying that you're super reliant on him. It's absolutely helpful to have a player like Ethan Frank that can score that many goals and have the depth. It's just nice when for a team like UMD, we got 5, 2, 4, 3. We got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 players that have a goal. At least one goal.
Right. Yeah, and I mean Ethan is scoring in all aspects of the game though. He has four power play goals, 1 shorthanded goal, 4 game winning goals. Like he's showing up in on the score sheet every which way. And
don't remind me of that shorty.
I mean, he's even got a couple block shots. Like the dude plays a 200-foot game, and he's on the power play. He's kind of like a Stamkos player. He sets up in the left circle, that Ovechkin Stamkos spot, and rips shots. And more often than not, it seems like it's going in the net from that area. And then throughout the rest of the game, he really reminds me a lot of Hugh McGing a little bit as another Western player. So if someone's looking at just the Western to Western comparison, who's a guy that he was on the line with for a long time, and when those two were on the ice, if you didn't sit up a little bit higher in your seat or you went a little bit closer to the edge, you just weren't paying attention to the game. And then straight NHLer, I think he's very much of an Alex Tuck type guy, very high energy, but 200-foot game. If you let him out and give him an opportunity to beat a goalie one-on-one, he can do it.
Yeah, and I'm not. There's nothing wrong with having the Ethan Frank type player. I just know, and I'll say this: Bruce Siskey, the UMD radio announcer, he is a homer by far. He might be worse than the Bruins announcers for the NHL for how much of a homer he is. But in the Western series, he was saying you can't let the third and fourth lines of Western beat you.
No.
That's the thing. And UMD, you can say that, but with that many players, that being that deep of a team, with that many players having a goal, at least one goal, it's hard. It's hard to say don't let this line beat you because you're like, okay, which line is it?
Right.
And that's where I think Western does run into a little bit of trouble for depth wise.
Yeah, they kind of run into that same situation that a North Dakota have, or a St. Cloud sometimes, where you can beat them as long as you stay out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
The second you start taking penalties and you give Ethan Frank, Drew Worrad, Michael Joyo, Ronnie Addard, Paul Washy, like anytime you give them extra space, a guy like Josh Pasalt, who if he has extra space and he can toe drag, he's gonna bury something dirty, and so I mean, staying out of the box is a huge deal when you're talking about teams of those calibers. Like their top line can hurt you when they're on the ice, so don't give them extra opportunities, and definitely don't give them an opportunity to stack the deck in their favor with Paul Washy in center winning faceoffs. I think a couple years ago, if not most year, he's near the top as far as faceoff wins for a center. Then you put the two rocket shots with Joyal and Addard at the blue line, and Ethan Frank can set up in his home office in the left circle on the power play. Like, that's a deadly power play. If you want to run a top tier power play one.
Right, and that's the one downfall that's kind of happened to UMD, at least this year. Yeah, we're deep, but golly, we cannot score on the power play. I think we might have the worst power play in the nation. I think we might have 5 power play goals right now, and it's. You would think a team that deep could score on a power play, but we're a lot better 5-on-5 because we don't have that top tier talent that can set up, that can, Ethan Frank on that left circle. We don't have the rocket shot from the top. It's just a lot of guys gelling together. And for some reason on the power play, it just doesn't work because we don't have that one stud or 2 or 3 that can get you those power play goals.
Yeah,
and
right.
I know that was a problem with Western. We were going shorthanded. But we were getting power plays, but we just can't. It's all of a sudden, oh, there's one less guy. We don't know what to do. Who do we give the puck to? We want to share it so much that there's not one person that's going to take charge.
Yeah, right now it looks like Duluth was sitting at 39th. 7 power play goals at 16.3%. Western
I forgot we had a couple against CC.
Western is at 11 of 55 for 20%, and that puts us at tied for 23rd.
and I think I brought it up last week. It was
Arizona State currently has the highest power play percentage at 37%, and St. Cloud is number 2.
I can see St. Cloud being number 2. I think a lot of that came the first weekend against St. Thomas.
Probably not wrong. I know they got one. Western was able to keep them to only one power play goal, and that was Friday night. That was how they got their first goal. Maybe it was 2. I think it was only 1 though.
But yeah, I know even the Colorado College series, it was one of the worst power plays in the nation versus one of the worst penalty kills in the nation. And that was, you were bound to get one when you had that bad of a penalty kill going against that bad of a power play. The power play is always going to win. But it was just kind of like, yeah, we're still not great. And it just doesn't look good.
Right, yeah.
We might get 1 shot or 2 shots.
They went, St. Cloud went 1 for 4 on Friday. Western went 2 for 5 on the power play. Unable to really capitalize on the 5-minute major. Actually, much at all. They only had 1 shot during that whole time. And then Saturday, St. Cloud didn't get anything because they were held to, they were shut out that night. So Western didn't give up anything there. And Western has a really good PK, and it's a PK that will get a little aggressive the more they win. And both teams went 0 for 3 on the power play Saturday night. And that leads to, the shorthanded opportunities, the shorthanded goals, things like that. So
Western has to have one of the better PKs in the nation.
I'm not sure. I know they did at one point for sure. They started the year at like 8 for 8 or something. I think the first PK goal they gave up was actually to Colgate. It wasn't even to anyone before that, I don't believe. Let's see.
Oh, and then the fact that, Frank, you have at least 1 shorthanded goal. Maybe you have more.
I can tell you in just a second here.
But even getting 1, that boosts a PK astronomically. Like, hey, we're down, but we can still score. It doesn't really matter who we're playing. And it was against UMD, one of the better defensive teams in the nation.
We have 2 shorthanded goals. And we've given up 1. I believe is how I'm reading that. So, I don't know when we got the second one. Paul Washy has the other one. In case you were that interested.
Not to pile on the whole Western love fest, but I know you had messaged me, and I saw this. There were 3 Western players for Players of the Week in the conference, which I think were well deserved.
If this is correct, which it should be, Western is currently at an 84.6% PK percentage. St. Cloud is at 84. St. Lawrence is at 88. Notre Dame's at 93. Northeastern's at 90. So, they're up there. Not quite at the tippy top like they were to start the year, and they've had some, a couple games where they've had some struggles, so.
Yeah, but they are playing better competition than those other schools.
Right. And they constantly say, your best PK guy is your goalie, and unfortunately we kind of have a goalie whose career average is about 2 goals a game, so that'll kind of hurt you here and there if your defense and your PK players are worried more about being in the offensive zone than the defensive zone. So And I mean, that's not really to take anything away from Brandon Bussey. I believe he's a solid goalie. I just think sometimes he gets a little too freewheeling, handling the puck or making Dominic Hasek type saves, and puts himself in positions where we've kind of seen already this year. Like he's gotten bailed out by his some teammates on a few occasions.
Yeah, that risk versus reward. He's a little bit Marc-Andre Fleury-ish in a sense. Not quite the Chris Osgood or like Mika Kiprusoff, just kind of solid, stay in the net.
Yeah,
type of goalie.
If he's calm and collected, he's definitely a very good goaltender. He's hard to get. He's hard to beat. I mean, he's a big guy. He's 6'5". Covers a lot of net. Moves very well, but like I said, I think it's sometimes he just gets a little outside of himself, and when you watch him, you're kind of like, okay, which Bussies do we get tonight? Do we get calm Bussy, or do we get overexcited Brandon, who almost seems like he wants to be a skating defenseman as opposed to a goaltender? So,
hang on, buddy, you're a goalie. The ladies go for the forwards.
But I mean, again, he's a very solid goaltender. Very happy to have him. I'm glad he's back. I'm glad he's not hurt. Glad he's able to finish out the game Friday and have the stellar performance that he had Saturday. So
yeah, and having a solid goalie, even if they give up a few, it's still better than having a goalie that's just completely bad and wants to do everything on their own.
Yeah. And I mean, a goal, two is not a terrible goals against average. It's when you start getting into 3.5, 4 that some conversations need to take place about maybe how we're playing or what we're doing defensively that's not working. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but sometimes the big nights of the 5 goals are sometimes we got to relax and realize, once one goes in, okay, it's time to buckle down. It's not time to go wheel around and make it.
Whatever.
we don't need to be making saves at hash marks, okay? And just settle down, come back within yourself, and simplify the game.
Right. Just keep it to the outside. Make sure the lanes are open.
And I think we kind of see the same thing with our PK as a whole. Sometimes, like, we start getting to the point where we've kept them to the outside long enough that they're not getting good shots, but now we want to go get the puck from them. Like, just it's, and so everybody starts moving. It's like an algae wave. It's like watching algae in the waves. Once if the waves are strong enough, the whole field starts moving. And so now we got our defenseman moving, and now our goalie's moving with them, and then everybody goes back the other way, and it leaves the net open, and we give up a power play goal. So I mean, our PK definitely functions the same way our goalie does, where every once in a while we start getting almost bored and a little antsy, and we want to overdo things.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think that we've done, or I shouldn't say we, Scott Sandlin has done well with UMD is, okay, we're down a person, but we still have a job to do, and if they give up a goal, you can bet your next 3 paychecks that kid is paying for it, whoever was out of position. Because we're a very disciplined team. Yes, power play goals are going to happen. It's just the nature of the game. That's why they're put in there. But the discipline and positioning, as long as you're in the right spot and the goalie gets a chance to see the puck, you're going to kill off most of them.
Yep, for sure. And that's what led, Fancy to having three games of shutouts. He was able to see pucks and be in the right position, and to some degree it was like he was feeling the game a little bit more than he was seeing the game, because he made some saves against Western where I don't understand how he knew to be where he was, but there he was. and he was just a
Mm-hmm.
wall. So,
And actually,
and he had a really good defensive core in front of him because they were keeping everything. Anything that was, anytime there was a rebound, there was three Bulldogs right around that puck, treating it like it was a rawhide. So,
mm-hmm. And actually, there was a thing Saturday before I started driving. They were recapping the five overtime game against North Dakota because that's who they were playing.
and this was the
And
first game between those two since that moment.
the first series, yeah, and it was the first series at Engelstead in, I think they said 3 years, which didn't quite make sense, but at least 2 years. Um, but I didn't realize Fanti actually went in for Stay Skull. I thought it was the other way around, and then they showed the replay, and Stay Skull had actually started that game, and I think it was in the third or beginning of the fourth overtime. He finally had to come out. He's like, I'm cramping up. I can't do anymore.
Yeah, no, that was a battle, and that was a hell of a game. And I think this weekend was this pretty solid battle, and a hell of a couple of games between those two teams. Like those two teams are just those two teams go to war.
Oh, there was.
Like they seem to hit harder, they seem to shoot harder. It's a battle every time the puck is stuck somewhere, and you're
Saturday.
gonna get punished.
Saturday, there was a nothing in front of the net. I think it was Fanti that had covered the puck, and all of a sudden, it all broke loose. It, I mean, guys were doing takedowns. I think there was an RKO in there somewhere. I mean, it was just like it all broke loose, and you're like, why? He covered the puck, but it's becoming more of a rivalry, I think, than North Dakota Minnesota was. Just because we are in the same conference and we see each other 4 times a year,
If not more. I think
yeah,
I think
yeah,
the fact that I don't know that it's necessarily. Don't get me wrong here. I think regular season definitely contributes to good competitive play, but I think when you start seeing the same teams in the playoffs, whether that's the conference playoffs for the conference championship to get that automatic bid,
mm-hmm.
or if you're playing each other in the national tournament for a chance to get that national title, like that's when you're really starting to build a rivalry with guys who have competed literally for the ultimate prize in college sports, that national title chance, and these were two teams that went all out last year. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they played more in that one game than they
They
did
almost played
in the
three
entire
games.
series.
They almost played 3 games.
Yeah, like they spent more time in that one game than they did on the ice this entire weekend. Like, that's the type that's what we're talking about here, and those kinds of moments will build rivalries quicker than splitting a regular season series in November.
Mm-hmm. And it, and they're rivals from before. They're rivals from the WCHA. Um, and the one thing about this conference now and how tight it is, yeah, you're gonna have more rivals that are geographically located, but every team is becoming a rival. It Western, with how they've been and playing, like UMD and Western have a rivalry. Now, I don't consider it as much of a rivalry just because of location, but it's like, okay, this is a huge series, a big series with Western. Now we got to go play Omaha. This is a huge series. Now we got to go play North Dakota. That's big for especially northern Minnesotans like myself. That's a big one because a lot of people go to North Dakota. But then St. Cloud, that's another big one. Colorado College, they're going to be, give them a couple years. Miami, it just, the whole conference, there's no let up.
No.
And every game is a rivalry game, at least for the players, and at least I would think for the players, because you're seeing them 4 times a year. There's a very good chance you're at least going to split. you want to sweep them, but at least a split.
Right.
And then you're going to see them in the tournament and probably the NCAA tournament because of how good the conference is.
Yeah. And I mean, up until I think it was last year, we hadn't beat St. Cloud at home in Kalamazoo. Like at a certain point, you start seeing those guys come into your building and they're walking out with W's every weekend. That's gonna start to grind the gears a little bit, and you're gonna be a little more amped up when that team comes back because you want to defend your home.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that this year. We took the 6 points that were allowed for hockey between us and St. Cloud and Kalamazoo, and we said no, those are ours this year. Please go home.
And that's what makes I know football has the 3-year rule, but college hockey too. The kids, they stay, and they remember, and so you're getting a lot of juniors and seniors and 5th-year players that are coming back year after year, and they just start to build that hatred towards all those teams, and they just want to beat the crap out of them every week, and it just makes it so much more fun.
And with this Western team, I think a lot of the reason that we did have the return rate that we did was because of the previous senior class when we had Hugh McGing stayed, Wade Allison stayed even though he was drafted by the Flyers. He made the choice to come back. Dawson DiPietro, like that entire group of guys, like they came back to play one more year, and granted they kind of got a little hurt because they got a little bit of the shaft because that was the COVID year that ended and without playoffs. But and I think if you ask me, I think that affected this most recent senior class because they were, they had to come in and play in the pod and then they were given an opportunity to come back for another year and they said yes. So I some of that I think rubbed off on them and we'll see how it trickles down to the next senior class and Ronnie Addard made a decision to stay and he's another guy who has a draft pick from the Flyers. So anytime that he's making a choice to stay a little bit longer kind of helps him build up his body a little bit and also shows guys that like just because you're drafted doesn't mean you have to take off right away and you can develop as a player a little bit longer and have
Right.
some extra fun with friends for a little bit longer.
And I think the development part is another huge aspect of why guys are staying because it is such a competitive league. It's not like you're playing in Hockey East or the ECHC where you got a couple top schools, but the rest they're just kind of cakewalks for everyone else. Like BC is not playing that tough of a conference schedule.
No.
They just aren't. And the guys that go to Denver, Western, UMD, they're playing the top of the top every single week and they're going to get better and I think a lot of NHL programs appreciate that. Now, Perunovic, he won the Hobie Baker and everything. He's a stud of a player. He missed last year with shoulder surgery. He played, 15 games in the AHL, and all of a sudden he's up in the big club. Injury-wise, but he's already making a case. This isn't that big of a jump. I was one of the top point getters in the AHL through 15 games. I'm going to put up points in the NHL. And I think that's the trend that's happening because you have Iafallo with the Kings. Tufty's played some games with the Stars. Mikey Anderson's with the Kings. And these are just UMD players. They're making that jump not long after they've played in the NCHC.
Right.
And it goes, there's Denver players, Western players,
Dakota
Omaha.
players.
Yeah.
I mean, look how many guys left from UND last year and were AHL, NHL guys. Like pretty much almost immediately, if not in the playoffs last year.
Why can't I think of his name? Schmaltz is Nick Schmaltz is, I think that's his name, last name, Schmaltz. Uh, North Dakota. His younger brother plays on the team now, but 2 years in, he's playing on the Blackhawks.
Yeah. So I mean, even before it was the NCHC, Danny DeKeyser was a guy who went right from Western to the Red Wings and went right into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think his first. I'm not sure if his first game was a regular season game or if it was a playoff game, but I believe it was against the Avs. I mean, legitimately, like, thrown into an old time rivalry that doesn't have the same grit that it used to. But he grew up knowing that was a team that Detroit played hard, and he got thrust right into that series. So
mm-hmm.
I think we're seeing a rise in college guys go to the next level and be productive at the next level. Guys like I believe Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary was a NCAA guy.
Cale Makar.
Cale Makar. Caulfield in
Montreal
had a stellar playoff season coming right out of NCAA play.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we're definitely seeing that it's a place to develop players and it's a place to grow your game and you can make it to the next level.
And I'm trying to think of. I think he played. 1 second. Come on. College. Yeah, Matt Boldy. For the Wild. Played 2 years at BC. And then last year he played in Iowa. He had 18 points in 14 games. He's knocking on the door of the NHL. So college hockey in general, but especially the NCHC, it's now becoming like the major juniors. Like before, 15 years ago, it's like, okay, you play college, you're like a third liner. You're not going to be a superstar. Now, Jack Eichel, superstar player,
right,
played college hockey.
Yep.
You got guys coming up through the NCAA ranks, and it's like, hey, we can actually make it. This is actually really, really good competition. You don't have to go and play in the OHL or WHL or the Q just to be a superstar.
And if you're playing in the NCAA, you're closer to professional teams. I mean, granted, there's a good number. There's 7, 8 Canadian NHL teams, but there's 24 American teams, and guess what? Some of the better college players are right in areas where there's a professional hockey team. I mean, look at Kalamazoo. You have Detroit, Chicago, Columbus, Minnesota is not terribly far.
It's not too far.
I mean, look at Minnesota. You have Duluth, St. Cloud, Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, Minnesota State, all right around the Wild. Like, I mean, if you think that these pro teams aren't sending scouts to these games that are close, looking at players, you're missing a huge opportunity to be seen by somebody.
And it's cheaper for them to do that too.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not, and they're getting to look at a bunch of guys, and a lot of guys on teams aren't signed. I believe Western has maybe 2 draft picks currently, one of them being Ronnie Addard, and I think we have one other one at the moment that I can't think of. But I mean, it's a great opportunity to look at guys who will be free agents.
Yeah, your best player isn't drafted.
Yeah, he's gonna be an undrafted free agent at the end of this year. Danny DeKeyser was a guy who wasn't drafted coming into college hockey. He signed as an undrafted free agent to the team that he grew up watching.
Yeah, and I know within the last year, or 2 to 3 years, because I think they were all the same class, and last year is kind of a blur, but Hunter Shepard signed. He was undrafted. Nick Wolf was undrafted, and Parker McKay was undrafted as well, and they all signed with teams coming to that out of the NCHC, out of UMD.
That big senior class that I was telling you about that came back. We had two guys leave that were signed. We had Matthias Samuelson, who left early to go play with the Buffalo Sabres, who had drafted him. Wade Allison stayed out his 4 years and then went to the Flyers organization, who drafted him. But you have guys like Dustin DiPietro, who signed as an undrafted free agent to the Buffalo Sabres. You have Austin Rushev, who signed as an undrafted free agent to the Rangers organization. You have Cam Lee, signed as an undrafted free agent to the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. Hugh McGing signed to the St. Louis Blues organization as an undrafted free agent. We had like 6 guys all signed to NHL teams, 2 of which were already were already guaranteed their rights to, but 4 others weren't, and they signed undrafted free agent contracts out of the NCHC, playing good hockey every weekend. So it's definitely a path to think about for upcoming players, and as a fan, I love it. I love going to a game and then turning on an NHL game later and going, ah, shit, I watched that guy play for like 4 years. I saw guys like Torrey Krug when they played at Michigan State back in the CCHA. I've seen, the list goes on and on of guys that we've seen. We've seen Rocco Grimaldi. Like, he was an NCHC guy.
And it makes it that much more fun, too, because you're watching these guys and you're like, okay, you're a draft pick, okay. How many more of you are going to be picked up after this? Right. Because you know that talent level is so high.
Yeah. And I mean, the scouts, even though you're drafted, scouts are still going to come look at you and see if you're worth the organization's time or if they need to think about trading your rights, and other guys are going to get seen. So it just builds and builds and builds on itself.
Yeah, so they might have, the scouts might have a player or two that, say the Avs have the rights to a North Dakota player. Oh, let's just see how he's doing, scout him out. All of a sudden, they see 3 other guys that are playing, or 1 or 2 just have an outstanding game between Colorado College and North Dakota. We'll just say that.
Right.
These guys now have an opportunity to play. But they're wanting to send their scouts there because they're like, these guys got some talent, and like, this is really good conference. Let's go check them out and see what happens.
Yeah. You want to know it's a really good test to see just how many guys your school is putting in the next level? Open up NHL 22, create a team for your school, whatever it may be, and start looking at rosters. And see what kind of team you can make with alum from your school. It'll take you a while, because I did it in NHL 21 for the entire NCHC. But most of the rosters were full. Like, it was enough guys, and a lot of them were guys that had participated in the NCHC. It wasn't even, I'm not looking at old-time Hall of Fame type guys. I'm looking at guys within the last 10 years who were making up a majority of my rosters.
And I can even think of, I can do a decent list right now off the top of my head of NCHC guys from UMD, with Perunovich, Tufte, Iafallo, Anderson. There's another one that I can't think of his name right now. But yeah, it makes it a lot of fun that you can put guys in from your school and be like, hey, Susi, that's who I was thinking of, because he's who Seattle took from the Wild.
Let's jump into the next weekend, and we'll kind of wrap it up after we discuss who's playing who this weekend. It looks like we're back to a mostly interconference play. I think we're taking a break from conference scheduling, at least for this week.
Yeah, I know we have Fairbanks, who Omaha just swept up there. excuse me,
Yeah,
up there.
Omaha completed a 4-game season sweep of the Nanooks.
Well, they played them 4 times.
Yep, they
All
played
of
them
them.
twice in Nebraska and twice up there in Fairbanks. Miami makes the trip. Nope, Miami has Long Island coming in. The Sharks.
The Sharks. I do like their colors. I like their jerseys.
Western takes a trip out to New York to play St. Lawrence. Both of those games are on ESPN Plus. I think I'm gonna do a play along, watch along for the Saturday game, and play some NHL 22. Have the game on my laptop. So if anyone wants to hang out and watch that game or talk about that game, I'll be around for that. Friday, I'll probably just watch the game, maybe tweet a little bit throughout that game. Minnesota, North Dakota.
That's gonna be. I
I think
don't think it's quite what it has been as far as rivalries, because there. I remember back in the early 2000s, there was a fight that broke out in the handshake line. Uh, there was
Western's had a couple of those.
just a little bit of bad blood between the two of them. But with North Dakota having the success that they have, and Minnesota not being nearly as good, I think that rivalry's kind of died out a little bit.
I was gonna say I don't see it being uh, as tough as North Dakota, Minnesota, Duluth was this last weekend. I think the teams are gonna play each other well. I just think that those two teams are battled harder than these two will.
I 100% believe that Bob can try and instill it in his players as much as he wants to, but I don't. The NCHC has been a thing for too long that I don't think the rivalry has the same effect on the players as it once did.
Right.
The fans maybe, but not the kids. They're long over that.
And it looks like everybody in Colorado has the weekend off.
Yeah, it looks like they're off till next weekend.
And the Huskies get a chance to lick their wounds as well and kind of recover from the weekend in Kalamazoo. Of course, when they do come back, they come back to North Dakota, so.
Yeah, at least that one's at home when they come back.
Mm-hmm.
That helps them out a little bit.
Man, Denver getting some home cooking and a nice little break. I think they might still be undefeated at home, but I know they're definitely their last 4 home games have all been wins. They swept us last week or 2 weeks ago, and they swept Miami this last weekend. So they're definitely experiencing some home cooking goodness there.
Yeah, and then they get to go to warm Tempe, Arizona when they come back. Yeah, the Colorado teams. Denver goes to to Arizona State, and then Colorado College gets to go to balmy, beautiful Omaha, Nebraska.
Ooh.
Of course, I'd probably take Omaha over Marquette, Michigan, where UMD goes.
The snow gets deep. Western's on the road for a couple weekends. They're away. They're up in New York. Then they've got Omaha. I think they get they're not home again until the 10th. Or they're actually at Miami and then Omaha.
Yeah,
and Omaha comes to visit. So
I did debate going up to Marquette. Just had a coworker move up there.
So I did catch a couple of the highlights from the North Dakota game. I do not like words at center ice inside the faceoff circle. It is stupid. And North Dakota has it too.
I didn't. I was paying more attention to the game the little bit that I watched.
Well, okay. I mean, as you should. But see, we here in Kalamazoo have a little bit of issue with logo changes and some drastic changes that were made both to center ice and throughout the university. and it's a big topic of discussion here. So I just happened to notice as they were zoomed in for the first face-off, because if you ever watch a highlight package on nchc.tv or nchc.twitter's page or wherever they put it, they always show the opening face-off. And there's 2 words in North Dakota's face-off circle. North Dakota. It looks dumb.
Well, you know what? They don't have a whole lot going on out there. They just have to grasp at straws.
At least they don't also have a logo next to it that's awful.
Their logo isn't awful, but...
Well, I was referring to the abomination that currently sits at Boston Ice Arena's center ice, that the home ice arena of Western Michigan Broncos.
Yeah, I thought the Washington football team moved there.
You know, it's very similar to their logo. That's so bad. Oh, I hate it so much. I honestly, part of me hates it because there's words at center ice. Inside if you want words around the circle, that's one thing. But to put words in the circle is another, and it's an abomination. And I don't like it. And then when someone says that there's words there because they have to explain the logo, well, then your logo's trash. And
yeah.
Do you know why logos are so, why they work? Because people know what it means. and they don't change them every few years. And they build longevity and memory. And they stay in people's minds. And you don't have to explain them with words. At center ice. In the center ice circle.
Sounds like...
dumb.
You have some issues that you need to work out.
I have a lot of issues I need to work out. Especially over the last couple weeks. That's a topic for another time.
That's for a different podcast.
And on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Make sure to check the description on the YouTube channel for our Twitter handles, the page's Twitter handle, and our email. And if you happen to watch this, I appreciate it. If you've made it this far, awesome. Thanks a lot. If you want to get a hold of us, those are the places to do it. And we'll talk at you another time for more NCHC action. Have a good one.
Night.